when I opened the small velvet pouch the police handed me after my husband's death. I expected a wallet, maybe his watch. Instead, I found two strange keys I'd never seen before. One thin and ordinary, the other thick and jagged, like it belonged to a door that shouldn't exist. But the worst part wasn't the keys themselves. It was discovering exactly what, or who, they unlocked. My name is Amelia Carter, and on a gray, damp morning in early March, I stood frozen outside the Hawthorne Police Department, clutching the collar of my coat like it might hold the splinters of my life together. 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since Daniel died. 2 weeks since the phone call that shattered everything I thought I knew. The accident had been swift, brutal, and, according to the calm voice on the other end of the line, unavoidable. Now I was here to collect the last of his personal effects, the scattered remnants of a life that ended without warning. Daniel had always said I took too long to make decisions. You could stand outside a store for 30 minutes just deciding whether or not to go in. He'd tease. I could still hear his voice in my head, soft, low, warm in a way that made the silence inside me feel even colder. But this morning, I didn't hesitate. I stepped through the glass doors into a building that smelled like old paper, bitter coffee, and a faint metallic tang I couldn't quite name. The woman behind the reception desk barely glanced up when I gave my name. Amelia Carter, I'm here for my husband's belongings. She scribbled something in a ledger, gave a curt nod, and murmured, Detective Holloway will be with you shortly. Please have a seat. I sat on a wooden bench that felt colder than the wind outside. My fingers laced together tightly in my lap. The skin stretched white over my knuckles. The tile floor beneath me was speckled gray with darker flecks, like ash on cold stone. Daniel would have said I was trying to read the floor. He always joked I looked down when I didn't want to face something. Mrs. Carter? I looked up. A man in his late 40s, dressed in a rumpled suit and wearing an expression somewhere between sympathy and exhaustion, gave me a small nod. Detective Holloway, he said. Come with me. His office was cramped, cluttered with files stacked in precarious towers. Road safety posters lined the walls, images of crushed cars and warning slogans that now felt like cruel reminders. My stomach twisted. Apologies for the mess, Holloway mumbled as he shifted a folder aside on his desk. Not exactly welcoming, I know. He gestured to a chair. I'll just need your signature to release your husband's personal effects. I signed the paper without reading it, and then he handed me a clear evidence bag. Inside, Daniel's phone. The screen cracked along one corner, his leather wallet, soft from years of use, a pack of mints, a silver lighter. Odd, he'd quit smoking 2 years ago. And a key ring. I stared at it, something cold pressing against the back of my neck. The usual keys were there, house, car, office. But clipped among them were two I didn't recognize. One was small, thin, like a mailbox key. The other was larger, heavy, with sharp, jagged edges, unusual, industrial-looking, and both were attached to a small, plastic tag, yellowed with age. But the number stamped on it was still perfectly clear. 39. If you need anything else, Holloway said gently, don't hesitate to reach out. I nodded, pressed the bag to my chest like it might warm me, and walked out into the cold, empty morning. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the key into the ignition. I tossed the evidence bag onto the passenger seat. It landed with a soft, accusatory thud. The drive home blurred past in a haze of silent questions I couldn't answer. I wasn't crying. Not yet. Back in my kitchen, I made tea, mechanically, without taste or intention. The kettle hissed, and I poured the water. Watching the steam curl up like a ghost, I needed something to do. Anything that didn't involve sitting in a room filled with Daniel's absence. Finally, I opened the bag. I laid everything out on the kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle I hadn't been given the picture for. Phone, wallet, mints, lighter, keys. I stared at the two strange ones. I knew every lock Daniel and I had ever owned. The house, the garage, the office downtown, even the old cabin at Lake Morton his parents sold last year. But these didn't belong. The smaller key could have been for a mailbox, but we'd never rented a box. The larger one, I'd never seen anything like it. It looked custom-made, brutal in its jagged precision. And then, there was the tag. 39. I whispered the number under my breath. It felt strange on my tongue, like saying a word in a language I didn't know. I ran my thumb along the edges of the larger key. Cold, heavy metal. Not random, not forgotten. The kind of key a person carries close, when they don't want anyone asking questions. Outside the window, the wind stirred the branches of the maple tree in our yard. I barely noticed. That night, after the sun went down, I sat in the dark at the kitchen table, the two strange keys lying between my hands like silent witnesses. And I couldn't shake the terrible feeling that whatever door they opened, I wasn't supposed to find it. Next afternoon, I met Sophia Ellis at the Marlowe Cafe, the little place with chipped teacups and uneven floors where we'd been meeting every other week for nearly 6 years. She was already there when I arrived, sitting by the window with her daughter Lucy, who was tapping away on a tablet. Sophia looked up, her face brightening in a way that felt just a little too practiced. "Amelia," she said, standing to hug me. "I'm so glad you came." Lucy didn't even glance up. "Hi, Aunt Amelia," she chirped, eyes glued to the game in front of her. "Hey, sweetheart," I replied softly, forcing a smile as I hugged Sophia. The scent of her perfume, something soft, floral, wrapped around me. It used to feel familiar. Now it prickled the back of my neck. Sophia pulled back, her hands lingering on my arms. "You've lost weight," she said quietly. "You're not eating, are you?" "I'm trying." I lied. We ordered coffee for me, cake for her, orange juice for Lucy, and settled into our usual corner. Sophia leaned forward, folding her hands. "How are you, really?" I stared at the swirl of cream in my coffee. Some days I wake up and I remember. Other days, I catch myself listening for his car in the driveway. Her expression softened. She reached across the table, squeezing my hand. "That's normal. You loved him. It takes time." I nodded, and before I could stop myself, I reached into my purse and placed the keyring on the table between us. "These were in his pocket," I said quietly. "I know all his keys, all but these two." Sophia's reaction wasn't dramatic. It was subtle, so subtle most people wouldn't have noticed. But I wasn't most people. Her eyes flicked to the keys, a half second too long. The corners of her mouth tightened before she relaxed her expression into something resembling casual curiosity. She picked up the keys with careful fingers, turning them over slowly. The larger one glinted in the cafe's soft light. Sophia cleared her throat. "No idea. Maybe they're from one of his work sites. Didn't Daniel work all over town?" I shook my head. "He had a site badge, a key card. These aren't those." She placed the keys back down quickly and reached for her coffee. Both hands wrapped tightly around the cup. Her fingers trembled, barely. But I saw it. "You shouldn't dwell on this, Amelia," she said gently. "You've been through enough. Men carry all kinds of junk in their pockets. Maybe a spare key for a storage unit, or something for a project he forgot to tell you about. It could be anything." Her voice was soft. Too soft. I tilted my head. "Are you okay?" "Me, of course." She smiled, a little too brightly. "I just hate seeing you like this." Lucy piped up from behind her tablet. "Mom, can I go play the claw machine?" Sophia nodded over her shoulder. "Go ahead, honey. Stay where I can see you." Lucy hopped down from her chair and skipped toward the arcade games near the back. Sophia reached for her purse, rummaging inside. "I don't think I have any change." She flipped the bag open and dumped its contents onto the table. Wallet, lipstick, tissues, sunglasses, and a set of keys. My heart slammed against my ribs. There, among her things, were two keys identical to the ones I had brought. Same small mailbox key. Same jagged industrial key. Same plastic tag with the number 39. I stared, my mind blanking in a single, hollow rush of realization. Sophia noticed a beat too late. Her hand darted out, scooping up the keys with a nervous laugh. Oh, these? No, they're not the same. You're just upset. All keys look alike when you're emotional. No, I said quietly. They don't. I leaned in, my voice low and steady. They're exactly the same, Sophia. Right down to the scratches on the tag. Color drained from her face. She began shoving everything back into her purse, moving too quickly. You're overthinking this, she said, her tone sharp around the edges. Grief does that. You're looking for answers where there aren't any. Her voice cracked on the last word. I sat back slowly, my hands curling into fists in my lap. Why? I asked. Would Daniel have the same keys as you? Sophia didn't answer at first. Then she laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. I don't know. Maybe he found them and never gave them back. I didn't say anything. I just watched her. She stood abruptly. I should go get Lucy. We have to leave soon anyway. I thought you said you had the afternoon free, I said. Her lips pressed into a thin line. Plans changed. She spun on her heel and stalked toward the arcade corner. I watched her go, every movement screaming tension, the stiffness in her shoulders, the tight grip on her purse. When she came back with Lucy a minute later, her smile was too wide. Next time, baby, she said to Lucy's pouting face. We'll play next time. Then she turned to me. I'll call you later, okay? I didn't respond. Sophia gave me a long look, one I couldn't read, and then walked out with Lucy. Her hand clutching the purse like it was the only thing holding her together. I sat there long after the door swung shut behind them, staring at the two strange keys on the table, identical. And I no longer believed in coincidence. Sophia showed up at my apartment the next morning, uninvited. She stood on the doorstep with a paper bag in her hands and an expression so carefully arranged it might as well have been painted on. I brought muffins, she said, her voice soft, almost sweet. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying, or practicing looking like she had. I let her in, not because I trusted her, but because I wanted to see how far she'd go. In the kitchen, she set the bag on the counter and perched on one of the stools, cradling her coffee cup like it might shield her from what she knew was coming. She didn't look at me right away. About yesterday, she began. I said nothing. I'm sorry if I seemed off. Seeing you like that, it rattled me. I didn't want you to spiral, so I probably sounded defensive. I raised an eyebrow. Probably. She gave a nervous laugh. Okay, definitely. I leaned forward, folding my arms on the countertop between us. Sophia, the keys you dropped, they were the same. She blinked fast, her smile twitching. No, they weren't. Don't lie. I'm not. Yes, you are. Her hands tightened around the mug. Amelia, honey, you're grieving. I know how sharp everything feels right now. You're reading into things that aren't there. I stared at her for a long moment, then asked quietly, Can I see your keys again? Her fingers twitched. Oh, I forgot them. Left them at my neighbor's. She waters my plants when I'm away. That wasn't just a lie, it was a rehearsed lie. I tilted my head. So, how did you get into your building this morning? She looked away. The building has a code, you know that? And your unit? I didn't lock it last night. I let the silence settle between us like a stone. She fidgeted. I don't know what you're trying to prove, Amelia. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm trying to understand why my husband had a set of keys identical to yours. And why you're lying about it. Her face twisted, lips parting like she might actually tell me. For a second, I thought she would. But instead, she stood abruptly. I have to pick up Lucy, She has a doctor's appointment. I glanced at the clock. It's 11 in the morning. It's a pediatric thing, routine, they're backed up. She grabbed her coat and headed for the door. I hope you get some rest, okay? And then she was gone. I stood in the middle of my kitchen, staring at the untouched bag of muffins on the counter. The walls of my apartment suddenly felt tighter, closer. I turned in a slow circle, my eyes landing on every object Daniel had touched. The coffee mug he chipped and refused to throw out. The throw blanket he always tucked around my legs on cold nights. The framed photos of us on the bookshelf. The air felt heavier. Sophia was lying. That much was undeniable. The only question was, what exactly was she lying about? I didn't want to become the kind of woman who stalked her friends or broke into homes. I wasn't built like that. I was the kind who said, "Bless you," to strangers, who returned shopping carts in the parking lot, who double-checked if a neighbor's cat was stuck outside. But by Thursday morning, something inside me had shifted. Sophia called just after sunrise. Her voice rushed, clipped, unusually distant. She said her mother had slipped on some stairs, broken her leg, that she was taking Lucy to stay with her for a few days. "I'll be out of town," she said. "Probably until Sunday. Just wanted you to know." Then she hung up. I stared at my phone, heart thudding loud in the quiet of the kitchen. She was leaving the city. Her apartment would be empty. And I had the keys. I paced the floor for nearly an hour, arguing with myself, half a cup of coffee going cold in my hands. I told myself it was wrong, invasive, crazy. But another voice, a colder, sharper one, spoke louder. "You need to know. By 10. I was parked outside a squat brick building in a bland part of town I'd only ever driven past once. Riverside Court. The address was scrawled on a dog-eared index card I'd found in the back of Daniel's old appointment book. Unit 39. The hallway smelled faintly of dryer sheets and dust. I stopped in front of the door, staring at the brass numbers screwed into the wood. I took out the keyring with trembling fingers. The small key slid into the top lock like it belonged there. I turned it. It clicked open. The larger key fit into the second lock, the one just below the handle. It turned as smoothly as if it had been used 100 times before. I pushed the door open. The scent hit me first. A soft, floral perfume I'd smelled 1,000 times. On Sophia's sweaters. And beneath it, the unmistakable trace of Daniel's cologne. I stepped inside, my heart pounding so loud it drowned out everything else. The apartment wasn't abandoned. It wasn't even messy. It was lived in, warm, comfortable. Toys on a shelf, a pink backpack hanging by the door, a man's leather shoes beside a woman's ankle boots, and on the living room wall, framed photographs. Sophia, Daniel, Lucy, smiling together like a family. I moved through the apartment like I was wading through someone else's life, a life I wasn't supposed to see. The photos on the wall stared back at me with unbearable familiarity. Daniel standing behind Sophia, his arm casually draped around her waist, his head tilted just slightly toward her, exactly the way he always did with me. In another, he knelt beside Lucy at what looked like a birthday party, lighting candles on a cake while Sophia stood behind them, laughing. They weren't the stiff, posed kind of smiles you faked for a camera. These were real, effortless, intimate. My chest tightened. This wasn't some secret fling. This wasn't a mistake. This was a life. Daniel had a life here. I wandered toward the hallway, my feet moving on instinct. The door to the bedroom stood slightly ajar. I pushed it open. It was worse than I imagined. Daniel's shirts hung neatly in the closet. Some of them I'd folded myself, years ago. His cologne bottles lined the dresser, half used. A watch I'd given him for our anniversary sat in a small wooden tray beside Sophia's earrings. On the bed, the sheets were slightly rumpled. They smelled faintly of both of them. I forced myself to look inside the nightstand. A drawing sat on top of a pile of papers, crayons on cheap construction paper. Me, Mommy, and Daddy. 3 stick figures holding hands beneath a lopsided sun. Lucy's name scrawled at the bottom in clumsy, uneven letters. I ran my fingers over the crayon lines, a hollow throb echoing in my chest. Daddy. She wasn't just calling him by name. She was calling him father. I didn't know how long I stood there, staring at that innocent, colorful betrayal. The soft hum of the refrigerator from the other room was the only sound. I left the bedroom and drifted into the kitchen. The refrigerator door was covered with magnets and more drawings. Daniel teaching Lucy to ride a bike. Daniel in the kitchen flipping pancakes. Daniel with his arm around Sophia, laughing at something off camera. I opened a drawer near the sink. Bills, receipts, shopping lists. And then, tucked between a stack of papers, a manila envelope. I pulled it out, hands trembling. Inside, a DNA test. Probability of paternity, 99.9%. I closed my eyes, forcing my breath to stay even. Daniel was Lucy's father. The weight of it pressed down on my shoulders, an anchor made of everything I never wanted to know. I placed the envelope back exactly where I'd found it. I didn't need proof. The truth was thick enough in the air to choke me. And then, the front door rattled. I froze. The hallway was too narrow to run, the bedroom too obvious. The door opened. Mom, I forgot Mr. Bunny. Lucy's voice, light and innocent. Quick, baby, grab it, we're already running late. Sophia. I heard the soft shuffle of their steps inside. Sophia stepped into the apartment, her hand still on the doorknob, and stopped dead when her eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The look on her face shifted, shock, disbelief, then something else entirely. A hard, brittle calm. Amelia, she said, her voice clipped, sharp as glass. What are you doing here? I didn't move. You tell me. Her gaze dropped to my hand, the keys dangling from my fingers. I used his, I said quietly. The ones you swore didn't exist. Lucy's eyes lit up when she saw me. Hi, Aunt Amelia. What are you doing here? Sophia's voice cracked. Sweetheart, wait for me in the hallway, okay? But now, Lucy. I heard the little girl's footsteps as she padded back outside. Sophia shut the door firmly and turned to face me. Her expression didn't change. I didn't want you to find out like this. I held her stare. Then maybe you shouldn't have lied. She opened her mouth, closed it again. I stepped forward, pulling the crayon drawing from my coat pocket and holding it up between us. She calls him Daddy. Sophia's throat worked around a swallow. Yes. For how long? She sank onto the couch like her knees had buckled. About 2 years. 2 years. 2 years of double lives. 2 years of Daniel coming home late, of canceled plans, of lies he slipped between kisses and shared coffee cups. I clenched my jaw. 2 years he lived here with you. With her. Sophia nodded slowly, staring at the floor. It started after his promotion. He said he needed space, a place to clear his head, and then he just stayed. I let out a low, humorless laugh. You didn't think I'd understand. You were his wife. I was. I don't know what I was. It wasn't supposed to happen this way. I stared at her, the edges of my vision hardening. But it did. She lifted her eyes to mine, shiny with unshed tears. I loved him. So did I. She wiped at her face, her shoulders sagging. It just happened. You mean, he raised a second family while I thought he was working late? Sophia didn't answer. I turned my eyes around the apartment once more, the soft lighting, the shared photographs, the life that had been built without me. I hope it was worth it, I said quietly. And I walked out, leaving her sitting on the couch, a silent, crumpled shadow of the friend I thought I'd known. Lucy stood just outside the door, her small face tilting up with innocent hope. Will you come over again soon? I managed a tight smile. No, sweetheart, I won't. And I kept walking, I didn't go home right away. I drove aimlessly through the streets of Hawthorne, the city blurring past in smudges of color and light. Every corner seemed stained with memories of Daniel, places we'd been, conversations we'd had, tiny moments that now felt sharp and false. When I finally pulled into the small parking lot near Hawthorne Park, I sat in the car for a long time, staring at nothing. The soft ping of a text broke the silence. "Hey, just checking in. You okay?" "Robert." Daniel's older brother. I stared at the message until the words blurred, then typed back before I could stop myself. "I need to talk. Can we meet?" The phone buzzed almost immediately. "Where are you?" 20 minutes later, we sat on a weathered bench by the duck pond, the water glassy and undisturbed. We'd walked this path every holiday when Daniel was still pretending to be a husband, back when I believed in things like loyalty and family. Robert kept glancing sideways at me. "You look pale." I gave a dry laugh. "I've had better mornings." He nodded slowly. "Figured, Sophia called me." "Of course she did." "Said, you found out." "I found everything." I kept my voice flat. "The apartment, the pictures, the DNA test." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "I'm sorry." I turned my head sharply. "How long have you known, Robert?" He froze. That pause told me everything. 6 months, he admitted quietly. Maybe a little longer. I stopped walking, my feet rooted to the pavement. 6 months? My voice came out low and tight. "And you didn't say a word?" Robert's jaw clenched. "What was I supposed to do, Amelia? Tell you your husband had a second life with your best friend? Just drop that on you?" "Yes," I snapped. "That's exactly what you were supposed to do." His shoulders slumped. He looked genuinely pained. "I didn't want to hurt you. And Daniel didn't want to hurt me either, right?" That's why he tucked his toothbrush into her bathroom and told me he was working late. Robert swallowed hard. "It was wrong. I told him that. I told him he couldn't live like that. But he did." We stood in silence, the soft splash of ducks gliding across the pond the only sound between us. Finally, I sat down on the bench, my hands gripping the edge so tightly my knuckles went white. "Did he ever say he was going to leave me?" I asked. Robert shook his head slowly. "No. He said he couldn't choose, that he loved you both." A hollow laugh escaped my lips. "You can't love two people and lie to both of them." "I think he convinced himself he wasn't lying," Robert said quietly. "He told me he felt safe with you, grounded, and with Sophia. He felt alive." I stared at the water, my jaw tight. So, I was the foundation. She was the thrill. I don't think it was that simple. It never is. I looked at him, my eyes narrowing. But it always ends the same way. Robert met my gaze, something raw and honest flickering in his eyes. "I know I should have told you. I carry that guilt. But you deserve to hear this. Daniel did love you, in his way, but he was weak. And selfish, and a coward." I gave a slow nod. "That much I figured out." "I just don't want this to ruin you," he added, his voice soft. "You're stronger than this. Don't let it turn you bitter." I stood up, brushing imaginary dust from my coat. "I won't, but I also won't pretend it didn't happen." Robert let out a slow breath, nodding. "Good. That's good." I turned toward the parking lot. "Thank you for meeting me." He stood, too. "If you ever need anything," I gave him a tired, hollow smile. "I'll let you know." As I walked back to my car, the wind tugged at my coat, cold and sharp. I realized, with a strange sort of clarity, that the betrayal no longer felt like fire. It felt like ice, sharp, clean, final. Daniel was gone. But the damage he left behind? That was still very much alive. I drove back to my apartment with a single, Crystallized purpose. If Daniel was beyond accountability, Sophia was not. For 2 nights, I pored over everything I'd pulled from the apartment: receipts, bank statements, the lease Daniel had signed in both their names, and a slim file of contracts stamped with the letterhead of Ellison and Parker Law Group, the boutique firm Daniel had partnered with on a luxury condo project before he died. His signature appeared on every page. Sophia's appeared on several addenda, often in different ink, occasionally misspelled, always dated after Daniel's accident. Forgery, I realized. Sloppy. Desperate forgery, but enough to push funding through without a living signatory. And the money trail? Sophia's modest design consultancy had ballooned overnight, its new capital wired from an escrow account tied to the project's contingency fund. She'd been siphoning Daniel's leverage to bankroll herself. Friday morning, I requested a meeting with Ellison and Parker's managing partners under the pretext of clarifying Daniel's estate. They agreed. Monday at 9. Main conference room. Over the weekend, I compiled a slim dossier. Photocopies of every forged signature, each paired with Daniel's genuine one. Screenshots of the transfers into Sophia Ellis Creative Limited. A notarized statement confirming Daniel's date of death. Irrefutable proof the documents were signed post-mortem. The DNA report, because if Sophia tried to weaponize Lucy as a shield, I wanted the truth anchored to cold science. I did not sleep Sunday night. I wanted clarity, razor-edged, merciless. Monday, 8:57 a.m. The conference room smelled of polished wood and burnt espresso. 12 people sat around the long table: senior partners, junior counsel, 2 venture fund representatives. And at the far end, Sophia, immaculate in a dove-gray suit, clutching a portfolio like a life preserver. She did not know I'd been invited. Conversation died when I stepped inside. Ms. Carter? Martin Ellison rose halfway. We weren't expecting. I asked to attend, I said, placing a manila folder on the table. Everything in here concerns my late husband's partnership with your firm, and certain irregularities that followed his death. Sophia's eyes widened, then narrowed to slits. This isn't the time or place. It's the perfect time, I answered, sliding copies of the contracts down the polished surface. Unless the firm prefers to discuss forged legal documents in front of a judge? A hush fell as pages flipped, quiet rustling punctuated by the click of pens. Ellison's brow furrowed. These signatures are dated 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks after Daniel's fatal accident, I clarified. Yet there's his name, in blue gel ink, alongside Ms. Ellis's. Your notary stamp is genuine, but the signatory was dead. One of the venture reps leaned forward. Are you alleging Ms. Ellis falsified authorization to withdraw contingency funds? I opened a second envelope. Wire confirmations unfurled like a damning ribbon. Sophia stood, voice trembling. Daniel gave me power of attorney. Prove it, I said. Silence. No document appeared. Her facade cracked, words tumbled, incoherent, defensive. She tried pivoting to Lucy, how Daniel had responsibilities, how he wanted Sophia secure. But the partners were lawyers first, sentimentalists never. Unauthorized withdrawals, forged contracts, exposure to investor litigation. The math was simple, brutal. Ellison closed the folder with a soft, lethal finality. Ms. Ellis. The firm is suspending all collaboration pending a full audit. You will return every disbursed cent by close of business today or face prosecution. Sophia swayed. You can't. I can, he replied. And I will. I removed the keyring from my pocket, Daniel's keys, her matching set. I laid them on the glossy walnut surface between us, the yellowed tags with the number 39, glinting under fluorescent light. Keep them, I said, my voice steady. They open doors to a life built on lies. They won't open another in this building. Sophia's lips parted, but no sound emerged. Around her, chairs scraped back, conversations resumed about escrow clawbacks, damage control, reputational risk. She shrank to a figurehead of disaster, their former darling now radioactive. I turned without waiting for her reaction and walked out, the conference room door whispering shut behind me like a verdict. In the marble lobby, I paused, inhaling the crisp, air-conditioned stillness. A sense of weightless finality settled over my shoulders. I hadn't screamed, hadn't broken anything, hadn't begged for an apology. I'd simply told the truth, and truth had done the breaking for me. Outside the glass facade of Ellison and Parker, morning traffic surged like a tide that wanted nothing to do with other people's scandals. I stepped onto the curb, the click of my heels sharp, certain. The cold air tasted different, cleaner somehow, though the street smelled of diesel and burnt coffee like always. Sophia burst from the revolving door behind me. "Amelia, wait!" She caught my sleeve, breath coming in ragged pulls. Beneath the immaculate suit, her hands trembled. "You don't have to do this," she pleaded. "They'll ruin me." "Lucy." I turned, meeting her eyes with a steadiness I didn't know I possessed until that moment. "You ruined yourself the second you forged Daniel's name." Tears spilled over her lashes. "It was for Lucy. I had nothing after the accident. And I had a husband," I said, my voice level. "Until you and Daniel decided I was optional." For a heartbeat, her face crumpled, grief, rage, regret, all collapsing into one twitching mask. Then something colder settled in her expression, as if she'd found a shard of pride to cling to. "You think this makes you whole, destroying me?" "I'm not interested in destruction," I replied. "Just truth. The rest is collateral." She let go of my sleeve. "They'll take everything." Her whisper barely made it past her lips. "Then you finally understand what everything feels like." A black sedan rolled to the curb. The venture fund representative from upstairs leaned across the back seat, eyeing Sophia through the window. I recognized the look, a business calculus measured in lost millions and legal exposure. Without a word, he gestured for her to get in. Her future would be negotiated in closed rooms under fluorescent lights. She hesitated, eyes flicking to me once more. "Tell Lucy the truth," I said quietly. "At least give her that." Sophia's shoulders sagged, the fight draining away. She climbed into the car, the door thudded shut. As the sedan pulled into traffic, her silhouette shrank, then vanished behind a delivery truck. I exhaled, feeling the sound all the way down to my ribs. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, unknown number. I let it ring out. A second buzz, voicemail notification. I deleted it without listening. A few yards down, a city trash can stood half empty. I pulled Daniel's keyring, the last piece of the lie, from my pocket. The metal felt lighter now, almost ordinary. I dropped it in, listening to the dull clang as it hit the bottom. The tag marked Thawi 39 stared up at me between crumpled soda cups and a discarded newspaper, no more mysterious than any other bit of trash destined for landfill. I flipped the lid closed, for good measure. I walked to a postbox at the corner and slid Sophia's forged contracts, the originals, now void, in an envelope addressed to the State Bar's disciplinary committee. When the metal slot snapped shut, it sounded like a bolt sliding home. Across the street, sunlight struck the glass of a high-rise under construction, the same luxury condo tower Daniel had once talked about as his legacy project. Steel beams glinted like polished knives against the sky. They would still finish the tower. I supposed. Investors always found another consultant, another architect, another face to smile on the cover of a brochure. But the name Carter wouldn't be on any plaque, and Sophia's wouldn't either. A familiar figure approached, Martin Ellison, silver hair blown sideways by the wind. "Ms. Carter," he said, joining me at the crosswalk. His tone carried a mix of formality and grudging respect. "We'll initiate the clawback today. Our firm will cover any remainder after the audit." "Good," I said. "Not for me, for Daniel's legitimate creditors, and for your investors." He nodded. "You handled yourself with remarkable composure." "You practice law," I answered, stepping off the curb as the light changed. I lived the case. I left him standing there, already pulling his phone to relay the aftermath. Halfway down the block, church bells marked 10 o'clock, bright chimes threading through engine growls and distant horns. I paused under a sycamore, bare branches scribbling shadows on the sidewalk, and let the sound wash over me. No part of me felt triumphant. Triumph required an opponent still standing to acknowledge defeat. Sophia would face auditors and prosecutors. Daniel lay in the ground. This was quieter, a flat line where the noise used to be. I reached my car, slid into the driver's seat, and rested my forehead against the steering wheel. My pulse no longer hammered. It simply moved, steady, almost calm. I closed my eyes and pictured the keys rusting under layers of garbage, the forged signatures already under review, the tower's glossy brochure designers replacing faces in Photoshop like nothing ever happened. But something had happened, and I was still here. I sat up, turned the ignition, and eased into traffic. A light drizzle began, soft pinpricks on the windshield. Downtown Hawthorne receded behind me. Ahead, the river shimmered, restless and wide. Somewhere beyond its bend lay the kind of blank space where a person could start drawing new lines. At the bridge, I rolled down the window, let the damp breeze spill in, and whispered a single sentence meant only for myself. It ends here. Then I drove on without looking back. I crossed the river and followed the winding road back to Hawthorne's east side, the neighborhood where the streets were lined with old brick warehouses turned lofts, and the air always smelled faintly of roasted coffee from the micro-roaster on the corner. I parked, climbed the 3 flights to my apartment, and stepped inside. The first thing I did was pull every remaining trace of Daniel from the hallway closet, the weathered leather jacket he claimed had gone missing, the battered duffel he kept for gym days, the canvas cap he wore on site visits. I stuffed them into a contractor-grade trash bag, paused only long enough to tear the jacket lining and feel the satisfying rip of fabric that once carried his warmth. Next, I gathered the framed photographs still lingering on my shelves. Wedding day, anniversary dinner, the ridiculous selfie we'd taken beneath the Hawthorne Bridge lights. One by one, the frames dropped face down into a cardboard box. Glass cracked, wood splintered. I didn't flinch. At the kitchen sink, I poured the last inch of his favorite single malt down the drain, watching amber swirl into the steel basin. The empty bottle clicked against the trash can, lid like a muted bell. Then I cleaned countertops, windowsills, every unseen corner. Not a frenzied purge, just deliberate strokes of a cloth that reclaimed the apartment inch by inch. By the time the afternoon light slanted through the windows, the space felt bare yet breathable, as though the walls themselves had exhaled. I showered, letting hot water hammer over my shoulders until the ache in my muscles dissolved. When I stepped out, steam still swirling around me, I caught my reflection in the fogged mirror. My eyes were tired but clear, my shoulders squared. Something about that steadiness felt new, earned. In the living room, I sat by the open window, breeze pushing sheer curtains in gentle waves. Cars hissed along rain-damp asphalt below. Somewhere a street musician coaxed a saxophone through a blues scale. Ordinary sounds, untainted. I thought of Sophia facing auditors, of forged contracts turning to liabilities, of keys rusting at the bottom of a trash can. Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was the quiet click of a conference room door closing behind you, the rustle of paperwork that couldn't be ignored, the silence that followed when there was nothing left to say. And me? I felt neither vindictive nor victorious, simply whole. A circle closed. The grief was still there. Yes, but it no longer owned me. I breathed in, tasted rain and river and the faintest hint of roasted beans drifting up from the street. I breathed out, and nothing inside me cracked. Above the window, the sky split open in a ragged line, sunlight breaking through to paint the opposite brick wall. Gold. I watched it spread, slow and certain, until the entire room glowed. It felt like an answer to a question I hadn't dared ask. I stood, walked to the door, and flicked the deadbolt shut with a metallic snap. No longer a barrier against memories, just a start line for whatever came next. For the first time since the phone call, I realized I wasn't bracing for another blow. I was simply here. And that was enough.